Servus and welcome to another episode of the Pro Hockey Pod, episode 55. This week, kind of got a special guy on. I met this guy when I was on my pro journey playing in Norway. He's someone that grew up in the Ontario area here, played OHL, had a very good career, ended up getting drafted in the NHL, played a little bit of pro, and then after pro said, I'm going to do what everyone does when they're done pro hockey and get into being a caddy. So, kind of a different episode this week for all the people out there who obviously love golf. I think it's kind of perfect, right? Hockey, golf kind of go hand in hand. It's something you always do in the off season, something to take your mind away. And this guy's obviously been on both sides of it now as a professional caddy for Taylor Pendrith there. So, this week's gonna be good. I have a lot of questions, obviously, for the hockey side and also the golf side. But first of all, welcome a good buddy of mine to the podcast, Mitch Theoret.
Thanks, Harzy. Glad to see you again.
It's been a while, but we're gonna play some catch up here. Don't you worry. But I always like to start off the podcast. I kind of just talk about kind of your childhood there. Like, I believe you were born in Montreal and then eventually moved to the Kitchener area. But like, what's kind of your earliest, childhood memory?
Oh man. Um, but yeah, I grew up in Montreal and then moved to Kitchener when I was a grade 9, so I guess 14. Um, Earliest hockey memory is probably playing in the big Pee Wee tournament in Quebec City. Um, that was a big one for everyone. Played a lot of cool teams. I actually crossed paths with a lot of guys who played on different teams in that tournament later in my hockey career, guys that played on teams that came in from Michigan, teams that came in from Ontario. So I mean that was a pretty big deal back in the day when we were 12, 13 years old. But yeah, after that, moved to Kitchener and became a Kitchener Junior Ranger.
Was there any I actually didn't know that you lived that long in Montreal there, but was there any difference in the kind of the minor hockey structures? Because you said you moved when you were about like 13, 14 years old.
Yeah, we didn't have well our well here in Ontario it's like triple A, double A, right? And in Montreal we had double A, double B. That was sort of the structure, but we also didn't have minor and major age groups. Like one year you're the younger group playing midget hockey or bantam hockey, and then the next year you're the older group. So it actually made it quite difficult, or I guess harder for guys, when you're coming into like first year bantam, you now have to compete against guys that are a year older. So a lot of teams only carried really 3 or 4 guys who are, you know, minor bantam aged to play in the bantam group because, everyone's going to take bigger and older guys. So that was a bit different when I came to Ontario and I came in major bantam. That was my first year living in Kitchener. And it was weird because, I was thinking we're gonna have to compete with another whole age group and but yeah, there's every age group sort of had their own thing and I think it was good. Gave more guys opportunities to grow, gave more spots to guys on teams. Um, I actually ended up playing 2 years minor midget when I came to Ontario. It's a funny story. I drove down from Montreal to Kitchener. That morning, I think we left at like 2 in the morning, and it was the first day of tryouts for Kitchener minor hockey. And I really didn't even want to be there. And we went out and played a scrimmage game or whatever. And I came back in the locker room after, and the Bantam coach came in. He introduced himself, and he's like, "Yeah, I know you just moved here and everything, but we're gonna have to see more effort if you want to make my team this year." And I sort of just like was like, "Okay, I don't. At this point, I don't really care. I just want to go to bed." And whenever I left after that and came back, was I'm gonna get ready to come back in the afternoon session and walk out in the lobby, and my dad's standing there. He's talking to someone, whatever, and I get up to him. I was like, "Let's go. I need some sleep." And he's like, "Do you know who that was?" I was like, no, don't care. Let's go. And he's like, oh, that was the minor midget coach. He wants you to come play for you guys this year. And I was like, I just basically got told by the Bantam coach I need to step it up if I was gonna, or I was gonna get cut. And you're telling me the minor midget coach wants me to play for him? He's like, yeah. I was like, all right, let's go. I'll play for him. And we left and showed up the next day. And minor midget coach was like, yeah, if you want to be on my team, you got a spot already. I was like, perfect. So that was the end of my tryouts for Kitchener minor hockey.
That's kind of interesting. Like one, I didn't know that you could play 2 years in minor midget. I guess it was kind of rare back in those days, like for someone to play a year up, because obviously the minor midget year is your major junior draft year, at least in Ontario. But it's fun. I guess there's a couple of different standards there, and I guess that just kind of shows what different people see, right? Like the Bantam coach had seen a kid that wasn't really trying and was like, "Hey, I want someone who's going to give more effort, so figure it out." And then the minor midget coach saw, "Hey, this guy just maybe came here and is on zero sleep, but he's got skill, and I could see him being on our team." So it's kind of funny how everyone has their own opinion of something and different things stand out to different people. But um, before we keep going about Kitchener, there, I forgot to ask you, like, what made you first get into hockey at a young age? Like, obviously, growing up in Montreal, the Habs are massive, so I wondered if they had an influence, or was it like your dad, or like what kind of drew you to the sport of hockey growing up?
I don't really know. I guess, I mean, it's like every typical kid, right? The first thing your parents put you in for sports is either buy you a pair of skates at 2, 3 and take you skating. Um, I guess growing up in Montreal, the Habs are royalty, kind of like the Leafs are in Toronto. Um, although the Habs have a history of winning, which is nice. Um, but yeah, we used to go to Habs games with my dad back in the day. My dad grew up playing hockey and he loved it. So, when Hockey Night in Canada would come on back in the day, we'd be right there in front of the TV watching it. Um, although he was a Bruins fan growing up, so it probably crushed him a little bit when I became a Habs fan at a young age. But yeah, just my dad would build a hockey rink in the backyard every winter. Just your typical like Canadian kid, right? Playing hockey, doing everything hockey, summer hockey. So that's probably where the majority of my love for the game came from.
I think it's very, as you said, very stereotypical for us
Yeah,
Canadians to, as soon as you can walk, it's like, hey, we're getting him his first pair of skates, and he's gonna try this out at, I'm assuming like in other countries, that would be in Europe, it'd probably be, soccer to them. Like as soon as you can play, you play. But that's
yeah.
kind of your career here. As you mentioned, so you make the move to Kitchener, playing 2 years of minor midget there for the Kitchener Junior Rangers. Um, I noticed you were a captain the one year, which you're not sure, but Elite Prospects gives you the credit, so I'm gonna go with that. Um, you ended up getting drafted to the OHL, so I believe you were drafted in the eighth round to the Niagara Ice Dogs. And I'm curious, at this point, and it's just kind of, I brought this kind of, I don't want to say argument, or I'd say point up a lot on this podcast, is especially in that first year, normally teams will take their first and second rounder on the team, and then they might take another guy, who is either a fourth or fifth rounder. Like once you were drafted going to your first camp, like had you thought at all like, hey, I'm gonna make this team? Or was it more like, I'm gonna go get a first year experience at this camp, hopefully get some reviews or some advice, and I'm gonna go back and either play, midget or maybe junior B, whatever it was.
I wasn't really sure. I mean, only being in Ontario for 2 years and not really seeing guys from my hometown or knowing anyone that had played in the league, how it all worked type thing. So I remember after I got drafted, um, I guess the Kitchener Dutchman Junior B technically owned my rights being a Kitchener minor hockey guy. But they traded them to Elmira because in Junior B you only had two 16-year-old spots. So they always held one for a Kitchener Ranger and the other one they had already signed Mark Scheifele. So I remember I went to Elmira's camp and they had signed a kid, a 16-year-old kid before camp even started that played in Guelph. And I went for 2 days to their camp and then had to leave to go to Niagara's camp. And the coach said, I'll never forget it actually. Before I left, the last thing the Elmira coach said to me is, call me when you get cut. I was like, all right, you know, thanks. But so anyways, went down to Niagara and I had a good camp. I kind of got, I mean, I played well and I got fortunate that Niagara's first round pick that year was Lucas Lesio, who said, I'm gonna go play NCAA, committed to Michigan. So that opened up that fourth 16-year-old spot on the roster. And they had the final inter squad game. And I just went in the room, coach's room after, expecting to get cut, and they go, we really like what you did. There's room to improve, and do you have anything set up on where you're going to play this year? And I was like, well, not really. Like probably midget hockey. The junior B coach basically said, made it sound like I'm on the spot there. And they're like, okay, well, maybe you should call them and let them know that you're not coming back anyways because we're going to keep you here all year. And I was like, oh shit. Like I didn't see it happening for sure, especially as a 16-year-old. Knowing that there's only 4 spots, but it's pretty wild to make the team that young, especially the vote of confidence I had from the junior B coach like 3 days prior.
Did you give him a quick ring up and go, hey, I don't need this spot, thanks, I'm gonna stay up in the O? Or
No, I never called him back. And he called me about 3 days later and he said, you never called me. I said, yeah, I never got cut. So you didn't get your phone call, buddy.
must have been like kind of, I know you said it was kind of like unexpected and all that, but it must have been a good achievement for you because as you meant, like, Lesio obviously first rounder is going to go to college, whatever, but that still leaves, another 6 rounds of maybe picks, depending if they had them for you, maybe 7 that could have made the team. And like at that time, like, just how the draft works and like with all the rounds and stuff, like it's I would say it's rare for an 8th, 9th round guy to make the team the first year out of getting drafted. So like it must have given you a vote of confidence, been like, hey, like, what I'm doing here is working. And obviously, to play in the OHL at 16 is obviously a good honor.
Yeah, it was really like a whirlwind experience that making the team that first year. I mean, I was still pretty new to Ontario in general. I mean, I didn't even know they had a four guy rule at 16. Um, but yeah, it was definitely I think a good thing for my development. Playing in that league at such a young age. We didn't have the greatest team, which offered me more playing time than a lot of guys. A lot of guys that are higher round picks on other teams that went to good teams. But yeah, it was a whole new experience. I mean, living away from home at such a young age. I think when I actually made the team, I was still 15, technically. And yeah, I mean, it was I can't say enough about the coaching staff there when I was 16, the ownership. They do a really good job of making sure you're set up for success.
How did the, like you mentioned, kind of living away from home, which obviously is a big step for someone at any stage in their life, but obviously you at 15 years old, they're starting out. Um, like how did the kind of the day to day change for you? Like, obviously the OHL, it's you're juggling both school and practice, and sometimes it's, you go skate in the morning, then you go to school, have class, and you come back and have like the team practice. Like you're obviously away at times for sometimes 3-4 days on weekends, depending on where you are. Like how did that all kind of change for you?
It was a bit of an adjustment. I had really good billets in Niagara who took me in with open arms, and they're still good family friends to today. And they had hosted players over the years, so they know they knew how it all worked and how to make things transition seamlessly. Um, I wasn't the greatest student, but I did go to class and I got by. So that was the school part was I guess you could say was easy for me. But yeah, it was just different. Like, you know, so as opposed to going to school back home, you're done for the day and then you hang around till 7, 8 o'clock for practice, like in minor hockey. It was more of a fully structured day, and you had curfew calls at 10, 10:30, and I was usually uh I was usually already home by then, just playing video games. So it wasn't too hard for me, but you always had an older guy picking me up and driving me everywhere, and I was super thankful for that. Guy's name was Shane Rover. He was a beauty. Uh, we used to rip around in his little Dodge Neon car to school and to practice, and we used to have some good times in that thing.
Only can only imagine. But yeah, it's obviously a big change, as you would say. And one thing I like to talk about with guys who play uh OHL or major junior is kind of that year one to year two difference. So obviously year one is kind of getting your foot wet, learning how to play in the league, under the and new coaches, all that stuff. And then year two is obviously your NHL draft year and a very big year for guys to take the next step. So a lot of times you'll see guys who might not have many points the first year, then the second year they take a bigger step, which allows them to get drafted or get NHL interest. Like going into that second year, like would you say you did anything different, like in terms of like whether it's training in the summer or just kind of the overall like mindset you had going into year two because you had obviously been there the year before?
It was probably till about halfway through the summer, I was pretty excited and confident going into year two. Then they fired the whole coaching staff and the GM. And I sort of went into camp that second year, like almost basically like I really need to try out and make this team again. It's not a for sure thing because, having the same coaching staff come back and making it as a 16-year-old, I had a pretty good exit meeting, and now it's, I have to impress a new GM and a new coach on why I should make his team. And I remember we were gonna have a pretty good team going in my second year. And then when our new GM came in, he made a bunch of trades like during training camp and really made our team good. So it was more of, okay, now I need to strap it in, and actually in my mind it was I need to try out again to actually make this team. Um, so I think that was actually a good thing for me developmentally because it made me sort of, had to work hard again. I couldn't just, like some of those older guys, you could just sort of put it on autopilot once you've been there for a couple years. For me at 17, I was like, okay, this is now I really have to, put my foot down and keep going. And I was fortunate enough to, impress him and make the team again. And we had a really solid team that year. My ice time was still being a second year guy on a team that went to the conference finals. It was still pretty low. I was only playing 9, 10 minutes a game. Um, but I think those are pretty valuable experience anytime you can go deep into a playoff and play with a bunch of other really good players who go on to do good things in pro and play in the NHL. So yeah, that second year it wasn't easy. It was definitely tougher for me thinking going in, I'm second year guy and play more, and I was sort of the same thing, just playing on the fourth line and really having to fight sometimes for a spot in the lineup. But I think it was all good stuff for character development and skill development as well.
Anytime you can gain that, I think playoff experience, and we'll talk about this kind of in a couple minutes here down the road. But yeah, that year I think you mentioned you went to conference final. I think um that was the year that Mississauga hosted it, right? And I think you guys lost to them. That was
Yeah.
I remember I used to work out with Byzantine, so like that I remember that year I think he had a very solid year and helped you guys get there. But no, as I mentioned, anytime you get that experience, I can't remember, and this came to the top of my head. I don't know why. I can't remember if that was the year or if it was the next year that you guys had that famous brawl with Barry where it was like 4 fights and like,
Oh no, that was my first year.
was it?
Yeah, it was so good.
Man, that video I watch, it's like
Oh,
obviously my buddy Stanish there was the one guy that filled McEachran pretty good because he started off as a righty and then just went right to his left and just fed him. But that
that
brawl, that video is hilarious. There's two very good OHL brawls online. There's that one, and then there's the one where it's Peterborough, London back in like '06 or something, and
yeah.
there's like 5 fights in 8 seconds or something. But yeah, that one's a good one.
I remember that brawl. Um, I think those guys, Stanish and McEachran fought first.
No,
Actually, no, it's
no,
Friesen
Friesen
and
fought.
Wigan.
Friesen fought. Then it was
Alex and
Stanish,
Friesen fought. Yeah.
and then
The
and
next
then
face off, Stanish and McEachran fought, and then I came out, and I remember getting on the ice, and then that was my first shift of the game that year. That game was my first shift, and I'm like, I think I lined up to Colin Behenna, who was a Waterloo kid. I didn't know him at the time. He was a bit smaller than me, and I just looked at him. I'm like, "We're going." He's like, "We're not." I'm like, "Okay." So I skated under the ice. I think I chopped Ryan Strome down, and the next thing I know, I think Dalton Prout is fighting Matt Baldessera,
yeah.
and then I tried to go after someone else, and I got a 10-minute misconduct and got kicked out of the game. And I think I played 2 minutes, was -2, and had 10-minute misconduct, and that was my night that night.
Solid
Yeah.
square sheep. I think too that Bulbasaur fight, like Derek Prout, that was like the size difference was unbelievable. But I remember too, after the Stanish fight, Clifford and Shaw lined up because they
Yeah.
wanted to go and the refs kicked them out. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh man, that would have been a good one too. But yeah, that was a good video. Good times. But back to your career here. Like so you mentioned before, you still were at a point in your career where you weren't getting, maybe getting 9, 10 minutes a night. But at the end of the day, putting up 20 points that year for not playing that much, you end up getting drafted in the NHL. So um by the New York Islanders there, like obviously any kid who grows up, one goal in life is to get drafted in the NHL. And, given the type of year you had, like were you shocked or were you excited to get drafted? Like kind of what was your emotions there on draft day? Because obviously, as you said, it was kind of still a development year for you in a sense of like ice time and everything.
Um, I was pretty surprised. I mean, one of the teams I actually had done interviews with throughout the year and before the draft was New York. So when they did pick me, I was ecstatic, but I kind of had a feeling if there was a team that was going to pick me, it might be them. Um, so yeah, it was just, I mean, going in, I remember my agent called me before the draft. He's like, are you gonna come down? I think it was in Minnesota that year. I was like, no, I don't want to be one of those kids that sits there for 2 days and has to go home with their tail between their legs. So I was like, I'm just gonna stay at home. And he's like, all right. He's like, I think that's a good thing. He's like, but you never know, something might happen. I was like, that's fine. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I'll uh I'll just be hanging out at home doing whatever. I remember I watched the first round on TV. I had a couple teammates picked in the first round, Ryan Strome and Dougie Hamilton. And then I mean, day two rolls around. I followed a couple of the first couple rounds just to see because I had some teammates that were gonna get picked in the second round, some friends. And I think about the fourth or fifth round, I just shut the laptop down and can't remember what the heck I was doing, but I think one of my buddies picked me up. Yeah, one of my buddies picked me up. We went to Pro Hockey Life in Kitchener, and one of the guys was there. One of the guys working there, and I didn't really was looking at my phone. And he's like, "Yo, look at this," and I was like, "What?" He's like, "You just got drafted." I was like, "What?" I pull up my phone. My dad's texting me, and everyone's texting me. Like, my dad's like, "Yeah, might want to come home." And then I got a call from their assistant GM at the time, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, I'm shooting pucks at Pro Hockey Life. And he's like, well, it's good to see you're working on your game, but we're gonna have you come down to New York in a couple days for orientation. I was like, all right, I'll be there. And so I went down there for camp for their rookie camp and the end of June, and yeah, just a crazy like eye-opening experience, the pro level and especially the NHL level and all that, and you know how much different it is than junior, and just really really unique experience that I was really grateful I got to get to be a part of.
No, I can imagine it was you know, something very different. Like obviously everyone can only imagine what it is and then you don't really know until you experience it. But I'm sure it helped you and kind of allowed you to see like, if I want to do this for a living down the road, like, this is what I have to do. And obviously you go back to Niagara there for your third year. You guys end up going to the finals that year. Obviously helped you like with that experience as well. But one thing I want to talk to you about, like, and we'll get to it as well. Like, you eventually get traded to Barrie in your fourth year there from Niagara. And it just seems like when you're looking at your career, like say what you want about the first couple of years, but you still were able to be on teams and kind of be maybe a puzzle or a piece to the puzzle, sorry, where teams were allowed to have deep playoff runs. Like as I mentioned, your second year Niagara, you guys go to the conference finals. Third year Niagara, you lose in the finals there. So like those 2 years, I think you played 14, 17 games. Then the year you get traded to Barrie, you end up playing 20 playoff games. I think you guys lost to London that year in game 7 to go to the Mem Cup, if I'm not mistaken. And then, another 10 the final year in Barrie. Like, did you just kind of maybe learn like how to be kind of like, I don't want to say like a role player, but you understood like where you were on every team and just kind of would do anything to help the team win?
Yeah, I like coming in as a 16-year-old, limited ice time. I had to sort of fight for a spot in the lineup, and same thing in year 2 and 3. We had good teams, and older guys are your best players, right? And we had a lot of good players. That second and third year, Darren Archibald, Alex Friesen, Andrew Agozzino. We had a lot of good older players, so it was sort of just buying my time until I got an opportunity. So like those first 2, 3 years, it was like, all right, I gotta be a third, fourth line player. I gotta make sure I'm sound defensively. I gotta hit. I gotta fight. And then that fourth year is when those guys all graduated, and it was like, okay, now I gotta remember how to put the puck in the back of the net like I did in minor hockey. Um, so that fourth year was big for me. Um, I mean, I'd always had that in my back pocket, but now I was definitely a complete player, a 200-foot player when I was 19, 20. And we had a great first line there in Niagara before I got traded with me and Brett Ritchie and Ryan Strome. Um, and those guys, if it hadn't been for the lockout that year, I feel like for sure Ryan Strome probably would have made the Islanders, and Brett Ritchie would have had a good chance to make Dallas. And I think that year when the lockout ended, we had Dougie Hamilton. He went up to Boston. I think that was the year they lost in the final to Chicago. So we had a lot of really high end guys, and that was just on the good side of getting to play with those guys, and then really getting to show what I could also do offensively. Then that year, yeah, at the deadline, I got traded to Barrie. It was kind of weird in Niagara that year. We were thinking about making another run at it, but there was a lot of uncertainty with the lockout of if it ends, who's not coming back and who is coming back. So they ended up trading me, which at the time I was pissed off about because I mean I'd been there for 3.5 years and loved playing there, but it also meant I was going to get another chance to go on a run and have a chance to win. Yeah, and we had a really solid team that year in Barrie. and took it all the way to 7 and lose to London again, which sucked. So I was glad to see that London lost the Memorial Cup the other night. That was really nice. I thank those guys in Saginaw.
That was first of all that game, so the London game, like they just walked that tournament. And then that game, I think they're halfway through the game and they have two shots, and I'm
Yeah,
watching it and I'm like, hey, it's like kind of I don't want to say miracle, but it's like kind of that same thing where like Saginaw hadn't had the best experience against them in the past, but it's like you just got to beat them one game, and Lennon came back, and then to lose it late, I felt bad for Simpson and net there, but not good for them to win. But you mentioned that like you obviously weren't happy about getting traded, but you go to a very good team. So like just to name some guys on the roster, obviously Niederberger and Net, who's obviously probably the best German goalie um, in the DEL and in Germany right now. Obviously, I see him very frequently. Scheifele was there, Ekblad, uh, another guy who's over in Germany now, Justin Scott was there.
yeah,
Um,
Eater.
yeah, I remember watching that series. Like, you know, it was obviously that was when it was becoming popular on TV to kind of get the OHL on there, especially the finals. Like, I remember those games. I remember the final game too, watching it
Yeah,
there. But I want to talk to you too. Like, I asked Scotter this too because he was on the podcast as well. Like, I feel like Barrie has a very good setup for being an OHL team. Like, you know, with the size of the town, like the rink is good, and I feel like the city really supports their team every year.
yeah. It's just one of those like, I mean, I want to say it's small town because there's a couple 100,000 people living there, but it's far enough away from Toronto where people aren't, if they want to watch hockey, it's like I don't really feel like driving over 2 hours to go to Leafs game. They love their hockey up there for sure. They're super passionate. Um, it's I guess it's technically a university town with Georgian College in there. But people seem to love the Barrie Colts up there, which is really cool. It was the same sort of thing in Niagara. People, I mean, we used to sell out every game in Niagara, even when we weren't very good.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it was getting traded there. I think was really good. Also for my development, getting to play for Dale Howardchuk. It's really interesting. It's something I only really noticed after I was done playing in Barrie is how two different coaching philosophies can really impact the growth of someone's game. Whereas in Niagara, it was all very structured, all systems, defense first. I think that 2 of the 3 years we were there, we were the best defensive team in the OHL, which is really hard to do. Um, I mean, it also helped that we had Mark Vizzentine in that, because he was unbelievable. And then getting traded to Barrie, and it was, where we were comfortable and okay with winning games 5-4 and 6-5, and it was all about offense, and probably explains why Barrie turns out some pretty gifted offensive players. I had a chance to play with Mark Scheifele there, Andreas Athanasiou, Andrew Mangiapane, Kevin LeBanc, like a lot of really high end skilled offensive guys. So I think that towards the end of my career was allowed me to shine a little bit more and go back to what I had done as a kid my whole life, and at the same time still being a complete two-way player and responsible defensively.
It's funny you brought that up. So on Elite Prospects, some guys have like kind of scouting reports from people, whether it's scouts or from the website that have done it. And I was just like, I was reading this before, and I was like, I wonder if he knows his scouting thing. So like it says Theoret has evolved from a grinder and agitator to an offensive weapon in the OHL. Has a good nose for the net, is strong, and has a good hockey sense. Has the raw offensive skill to play some form of pro hockey next season, but will need to reacquire some grit to move up the ranks. So it's just like you talking about, you know, how you started in the OHL, like you were that kind of defensive role, like willing to get dirty, willing to fight. And then when you know, your fourth year there and fifth year, you kind of became more of the guy it relied upon. So I just thought that was funny. But after that year in when you guys lost to London in Game 7, was there any thought in your mind to either go USports or go try pro hockey, or had you always kind of set yourself on, I want to go back, play my last year, my overage season, and then see where it takes me?
I was always set on going back um for another year. One because I loved playing in the OHL. It was such a good league, and I had so much fun. And there's always guys that, every year there's a guy or two that went back for an overage year and had a really good year, and they'd sign entry level deals, or they get some pretty nice offers. So I was like, you know what, I'll go back and play another year, um, and see what I can do. If that doesn't work out, I mean, the school option will always be there, or some sort of other pro option. So for me, going back for that overage year, I knew we were gonna have another pretty good team. Um, I remember that fall before my overage season, I went to the Winnipeg Jets camp, and I had a good camp, and they were interested, and they sort of told me, "Hey, we're gonna follow you, like you're one of our prospects, and keep an eye on you." And then I knew with London hosting the Memorial Cup that year that they had zero overage forwards coming back, and my agent at the time actually called me and said, Dale and Mark Hunter have already called in the summer about trying to get you there for their Memorial Cup. And I was like, I mean, I was like, that'd be great if I can go there, and have a chance to play in the Memorial Cup. That'd be sweet. So I went back to Barrie, um, sort of played that year and did everything I could, and Barrie decided that we were going to go on another run too, and we lost in the Eastern Conference final, I believe, that year. Can't remember. It was like 10 years ago now. It's crazy, but we had a good team. Went on a little bit of a run, fell short again, but yeah, I was just super, super grateful for those 5 years. I mean, not a lot of guys get to play 5 years in that league, let alone play in the league at all. So I was super, super thankful and grateful for both teams I played for in that league.
It's definitely, I've mentioned this so many times, like for us growing up, the OHL was to a lot of people the NHL, and like or the first step towards it, because I grew up in Peterborough, like I idolized those guys and always wanted to do it. And people I think who get to do it and get to do it for 4 or 5 years, like probably similar to what college is, like in terms of like you just kind of live in a different world for those years, like a bubble life. And obviously, as I mentioned, you're looked up to. Obviously, it brings a nice aurora to like your career and stuff. And as I said, like you're playing in front of thousands of people every night, and which is crazy because it's junior hockey, you know what I mean? But it's obviously tremendous. And eventually you do have to move on. You can't play forever in that league. And I know found this kind of interesting. Like you ended up, so after your overage year, you ended up playing one playoff game for the Arizona Sundogs in the CHL.
Yeah. Um, my assistant coach at the time, Todd Miller, who I believe is now coaching in Germany. The heck's he coaching? Anyways, he was my assistant coach in Barrie, and our season ended, and he said, "Hey, one of my good friends is the head coach in Arizona. They're in the playoffs. They need a player. Do you want to go?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll go play. Like, whatever. I mean, it was still end of March, April, and I was feeling good, and I was like, yeah, I'll go. Dip my foot in the pro pool and get my name out there, type thing." And he's like, "All right, I'll put you in contact." So he called me up the next day. It was like 2 or 3 days after our season ends, and he's like, "Yeah, we're starting the conference final on Saturday. I think they're playing Colorado. They're playing Colorado. I can't remember what the team name was, but he's like, I want to bring you out." And I was like, "All right, perfect. Send me whatever you need me to do, and I'll hop in the plane." He's like, "Okay, I'll talk to ownership and we'll get it all figured out." So he called me the next day. He goes, "Ownership doesn't want to spend the money." And I'm like, "Okay, no worries. Like, no big deal." And so a couple days go by, And now I'm in like full off season mode. And I remember I was out at my uncle's in Uxbridge, and we were actually at the uh, casino in Port Perry, and my phone rings and it's an Arizona number, and I'm like, all right, I'll answer it. And it was him again. He's like, "Do you still want to come play?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And in the back of my mind, I'm like, I haven't skated in like a week or done anything in a week. I'm like, it's probably not the greatest idea, but why not? So he's like, and it's like 10:30 night. He goes, all right, I'll call you back in a minute. We'll get you a flight. You'll meet us in Colorado. We're playing game 6 of the conference finals. I'm like, all right. So he calls me back. He goes, we got you a 4 a.m. flight or 5 a.m. flight out of Buffalo tomorrow. Can you get it? Can you make it? And I'm like doing the math in my head. I'm like, yeah, I can make it there. So I just leave there, drive back to Kitchener, throw together a little bag, grab my gear, and I got to the Buffalo airport at like 3:30 in the morning. Hop on the plane, land in Denver at noon. And like at this point, all I want to do is to go to the hotel and sleep. So we got a game the next day. He's like, no, we're going to the rink. We got practice. And he probably looked at me when I got on the ice. It's like, oh my God, what is this guy doing? Like, I mean, I was a week into an off season. So, I mean, we all know what that's like. And no sleep. And now I'm basically doing a practice, getting ready for, a really important game for them because it was an elimination game. And I would go to bed, wake up the next day, go to morning skate, and we got slaughtered. It was like 7-1 was the final score. And I was like, I think I played like 5 minutes. I didn't play in the first period at all, didn't play in the second, and then we were down like 6-0 going to the third, and I finally got some charity shifts, and yeah, it was a long travel day and a long 48 hours to play 5 minutes and get beat up and then fly home the next morning. It's crazy.
Welcome to the lower ranks of pro hockey.
Yeah, welcome to pro hockey.
Um, yeah. Well, anyway, so then the next year you end up going to Germany. There, playing in Bayreuth in the Oberliga there, playing for someone that I obviously worked with, but we won't get into that. But how was your first experience? Obviously in Europe, like obviously the Bayreuth rink, I think I know well. Outdoor rink, maybe not the nicest, but the city itself, I think, is a good city. To be honest, it's a university town. And then after that, you end up making the decision to leave, I believe, after 12 games to go to USports and University of Prince Edward Islands. Just talk about kind of that year and the decision to eventually leave pro to go to school.
Yeah, when that summer when I wanted to play, I didn't want to go to school right away. I wanted to sort of exhaust my options. Um, and I always wanted to play in Europe. I was like, at this point, I'm probably not. I really didn't want to play in the East Coast or Central League and ride the bus. I was like, you know what, I'll go over to Europe if I can, and I'll try to work my way up. And if not, at least it'll be a cool life experience getting to play over in Europe and living over there. So I got hooked up with them, and like you said, I mean, you never really know what you're walking into when you go into those second and third tier leagues over in Europe. Um, I mean, I showed up and half the rinks outdoors, uh, which at the time I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Um, and yeah, they had the town there is awesome. They put me up in a really nice apartment, all that stuff. And unfortunately, the team ran into some financial problems that year, and I just couldn't afford to stick around not knowing if a paycheck was going to come. Um, so that's when I decided to leave to go to University of Prince Edward Island. And that summer, I'd gone around to a few schools and sort of, went on, I guess, recruiting trips and, told them like, I'm definitely interested in the school option, but I'm also definitely thinking pro option. So I sort of had them as a fallback. And I remember Prince Edward Island on a recruiting trip in the summer, and I went there as a kid on family vacation, and liked it. And then I went on that summer recruiting trip, and I was like, it was like 25 degrees. You're right on the ocean. The town of the town there is a really cool spot. I mean, it's a small university, and you're playing in that AUS division, which is really good hockey for university hockey out east. So I called them up. I was like, "Hey, I'm going to be leaving Europe. I'd still love to come play for you guys if you have a spot." And the coach was like, "Absolutely. Like, you show up second semester and we'll hit the ground running." So went out there. Had a good experience. Like the guys on the team were great, coaches were great, but I feel like that year was they had the record snowfall for PEI. And I remember waking up one morning and I was like, there's a big difference between PEI in the summer and PEI in the winter. And I was like, man, I don't know if I can live here for the next 4 or 5 years. I was like, I like the school, I like the guys and everything, but there's something about waking up and seeing so much snow outside that we literally had 7 days in a row of snow days. I was like, I just can't do this anymore. So that's when I left. And at that point, it's kind of almost like done with hockey in a sense where like, I don't have that aspiration to play pro anymore. Now it's about, what am I going to do for the rest of my life type thing. So that's when I decided to go to Ryerson. Um, and yeah, just, it was closer to home, living in Toronto, which was a big selling feature. And a bunch of the guys I played with over the years who are a year younger were now starting to explore the school options. So I knew like 4 or 5 guys going in on that recruiting class, which made Ryerson the easy sell for me.
And it's like, as you mentioned, it's very different there. So PI to Ryerson, like I had a buddy that went there, and I always found it unique because I was used to when you go to college, you have a campus, you have dorms. Where Ryerson, the campus is going through downtown Toronto. Like it's literally buildings spread out through the city. There's not really much of a campus. Like my buddy lived in an apartment on like the 32nd floor somewhere with another buddy. Like it's a very different thing. But the selling point is, it's downtown Toronto. There's always something to do. I believe you guys had just renovated to the old Maple Leaf Gardens, and you guys that's where your rink was. So that was kind of a selling point as well. But um one thing I found funny, you just mentioned it. You're like, I don't think I could do so many snow days in my life going to school. Well, evidently, after you finished at Ryerson, you end up signing pro in Kongsvinger, Norway, where
Mm-hmm.
this is where we met each other. I had just gotten released from a team, ended up going there because I had known the league before. But for someone not liking snow, you really picked the wrong place to go because for those who don't know, Kongsvinger is a very small town with absolutely nothing to do. And they had the hockey team there. I think now they've dropped down a couple leagues. But when we were there, they were in the first league. Um, very different type of pro hockey. I would say a lot of teams in our league would have big budgets and guys who are fully pro were Kongsvinger or where I had also played before in Mangalore. All these guys worked. So all of the non-imports would work all day and then come to practice at 5:30. And that was the constant routine. But how was your experience? Because obviously you were there the full season. Like obviously, your first real, I would say, pro season, playing a full year in the top league in Norway, the town we mentioned. But yeah, how did that opportunity come about, and like how was your experience?
When I was after my second year at Ryerson, had a good year, and I was like, you know what, I want to give this pro thing another chance. Um, the school definitely wasn't for me. I knew that even if I got a degree, I didn't plan on doing anything with it after. I just could never see myself sitting in the office, you know, 5 days a week. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give this thing another kick at the can and see how far I can ride it. So I started looking. It was pretty late actually. It was definitely like towards the end of where like teams have already sort of filled definitely all their import spots, and not knowing I didn't have an agent at this time. So I had no real idea of what each league's import rules were. So I started going around and looking at more so countries that I'd like to play in, and countries I knew if I went there and I played well, there'd be definitely be opportunities to move up to a higher league. And Norway seems to be one of those leagues. Like they have a good league in Norway, but if you excel in that league, it's not uncommon for imports to sign in better leagues the next year. So I figured, at Kongsvinger, they're not one of the strongest teams in the league because all the other teams, Stavanger, they won't take guys unless they have, pretty reputable pro resume. So I was like, I'm gonna give this team a chance. Good or bad we are, I know if I go there and play well, I can, prove myself. So I found I found the coach at the time, Ed Galliani. I found his contact information somewhere. I think it was on LinkedIn. And I just sent him a message like, hey, I'm looking to play pro. I don't know what your situation is. Do you have any interest? And he called me the next morning because he was already over there. And he ended up calling me at like 6 in the morning and I missed his call. And I'm like, damn, here goes my chance. And he sent me a text. He's like, sorry, didn't realize how early it was there. I'll call you back in a bit. So he called me back and he basically told me like, yeah, I got one spot left. Um, if you want it, you're on the team. I'm like, perfect. I was like, sign the contract the next day, call up Ryerson. Um, I kind of told them at the end of the year that I wasn't thinking about coming back. And I think within like 4 days I was on a flight to Norway. Um, and yeah, it was an eye-opening experience. I mean, the town was cool. It's tiny. I mean, there's not much going on there. Um, but it was an opportunity for me to play and play a lot. I mean, most games as a forward, I was playing like 25, 30 minutes, which is unheard of in any really any league. Um, we didn't have the greatest team. I'm sure you remember that, but we had fun. Like I think everyone remembers that game right before Christmas break against Stavanger when we beat them in overtime. And then I don't think we won a game the rest of the year. Like we went on like a 20-something game losing streak, but yeah, it was a fun year. Despite our record. Unfortunately it ended with a season-ending injury for me. But yeah, I was super, super thankful for the opportunity that Ed gave me. Um, basically on a whim to just sort of restart my pro career again, which was nice.
Yeah, first to touch on like kind of your season, like we were a very well, so I would say Kongsvinger was a very bad team. Like they finished last. I think they whatever you guys won, maybe 4 games all year, 3 games in a 45 game season, and a lot of games were 5, 6 goal differentials, and like for you to put up 24 points in 35 games and only be minus 13. I mean, for the amount of minutes you played, I'd say that's a tremendous feat. Like, we gave up a lot of shots. Because imagine, like, it's nothing against them. Like they were a low budget team and it's a small town, so it's hard to get sponsorship money, whatever. You're getting 400 fans a game. Like it is what it is. And all those guys had real jobs. So like they weren't getting as much money to play. And maybe it wasn't always their first priority. It was just a way to stay involved in hockey. And they gave everything they had. But it was a struggle. I remember showing up there and I think it took 6 weeks for me to get my playing visa. So I was just sitting and practicing. And then I remember my first game, we played at home against, I can't remember if it was Lawrencegog or Sternen. And I remember I played really well and I gave up 8 goals. And I remember Ed giving me shit for that, like being like, "Oh, I thought you would bring more," and I was just like, "I just had 50 something saves, but okay, yeah, we'll blame this on me." And but it was an interesting time. Obviously, a little different from when I was in when I was in Mangalore. But one thing I want to talk to you about, obviously, another buddy of mine that was there who I went to school with, Zach Josepher. We were living together at somebody's house, and we have. So for those who didn't know, like, obviously in pro hockey, you normally have 1 day off a week. So before I got there, Kongsvinger had 0 off days, and I think 3 months you guys had told me. And I went into Ed's office and I said, "This is a joke. Like, this is pro hockey. You need a day off. Like, and especially us, it wasn't going to change our season." So we ended up getting these days off, and we ended up picking up a very good routine. As I said, not very much to do in Kongsvinger there. So um, I think these are my fondest memories of being in Kongsvinger, to be honest. The hockey part of it sucked, and I ended up leaving eventually at the deadline to go back to Germany. But these, whatever they were, Mondays, because normally in Norway you play Thursday, Sunday were your games. These Monday day off days were unbelievable. I'll let you tell the story of what we did, but it's so funny. Something so simple could mean so much, but this became our routine every Monday.
Yeah, it wasn't anything sexy or anything, but we used to run down and grab a kebab and have a few beers and we'd play Xbox all day long. And it was almost like that feeling of being in junior hockey again on those Mondays. Like we just get our shit kicked in for 2 straight games. And it was like, all right, Monday's here. I can't wait to grab a kebab, have a couple beers, and play Xbox. And it was like the light at the end of the tunnel almost every week. I
Hmm.
mean, I mean, it is so simple, but it was pretty much needed, especially there when, you in the winter you get up and it'd be still dark at 9 a.m. and the sun would be gone again by 3:30 in the afternoon. Um, but yeah, like I mean that was like the golden ticket for us was those Mondays and it was I wish it had been a little different and we'd been a little more competitive, but like you said, our team budget was, 1/10 of what the best teams were. And those guys, I mean, the guys we had on our team were great guys. No doubt, like they were good people and they worked hard, but like anywhere you go in Europe, it's, you're at the mercy of a team's budget. And we were on the bad end of that stick, but we made the most of it. I mean, we had a lot of good people, a lot of people I still keep in contact to till today. Um, I think our imports were good players, but they were also really good people, and it was really easy to find some fun in other in in other words, such a bad hockey season. Um, but yeah, we used to have we made the most of what we had to deal with, so we had a good time.
A lot of Call of Duty, a lot of chill, and yeah, as you said, go get these big kebabs that were just massive. Were like 2 meals in one, and then maybe order dinner later, and it was just a routine. But no, it was, as you said, not a place, not much to do. Like there wasn't a lot of sunlight at that point, and the season was tough on us, so it was definitely something positive to do every Monday, and we just kind of got into a routine, and it was good. But back to your hockey career there. So after Norway, you end up signing in the sets in there in the Czech second league, which obviously is a very good league. I remember talking to you while you were there, like you seem to really, really enjoy it. You end up having 30 points in 32 games and some points in the playoffs as well. Um, how did the Czech league differ from the Norwegian league?
Definitely a different style of hockey. That league was super fast. I remember towards the end of that year in Norway, um, I sort of was planning on, where would I like to play next, or at least what country would I like to play in next. And I played with some Czech guys over the years in the OHL, and they'd always raved about the Czech league and just living, and other guys who are North American that played in Czech Republic and how great of a league it was and how of a country it is living there. So I'd sort of plan or hope to plan that the next year I'd end up somewhere in the Czech Republic. Um, and yeah, that team, we had a really good team. It was, I think we finished second in the regular season, made all the way to the finals. So it was quite a different change of pace from the year before, winning 4 games and not having a hope in hell of even sniffing the playoffs. But yeah, that was really they really ran like a pro organization there. Very structured. I mean, that was guys' first jobs. So it was everyone there was super competitive. Um, and I had a pretty good year. I had a few injuries and I had a work visa issue where I had to leave um for 6 weeks in November and had to go home because the team forgot to get me a work visa when I showed up. So that was just a nightmare. But they still paid me while I was gone. I came back and finished the year, and it was kind of the same as the beginning of it was like it was in Norway. Like the Czechs are super hardworking players, and they demand their coaches and their front office demand a lot out of their players in terms of work ethic. Um, I remember we were doing 2 days in training camp, and we had 1 day off every other week. And then same with the regular season, we had before I had to leave for when I had my work visa issue, um, we had we hadn't had a day off in like almost 3 months. And I was like, man, there's no way this is like sustainable throughout the year. And then I came back after my 6 week break. I remember that first couple, basically like first 2 weeks home, I didn't do a thing. I was like, I'm beat up, I'm tired, I'm not doing anything. And then I started skating. I started skating with the Dutchman again. I think I even came out and skated with you guys in Burlington, um, with the Cougars a couple times. And I just remember going back and I was felt so refreshed. And I think the first game back, I had a couple points, and the next game back, second game back, I had 5 points, and all the guys went into the coach's office and they looked at the coach. He's like, "See, this is what time off will do. Like, this guy's coming back because he had some time off and he's fine now." And those guys still hadn't had a day off. So it kind of changed the dynamic that way a little bit. But yeah, we had a good team, went on a pretty good run, lost to a team with, a slightly bigger budget than us, which is, just the way it works over there. Um, but yeah, it was really cool. I was really grateful when my career was over that I could look back and say that, I got a chance to play in 3 different countries and experience 3 different cultures. Um, and that's sort of what I wanted to do when I left Ryerson, knowing that like, I'm not going to make the NHL. Now it's about, you know, how can I, gain life experience and still get to play hockey and make some money at the same time.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't that the year that year? Didn't you guys lose to Kladno, and that was the team that Yager owned, and he just like came out of retirement to come play in the playoffs?
Yeah, I remember he came out of he played a couple games throughout the year, and then yeah, he came back full time towards the end. And they also picked up Thomas Plekanec at the end of the year because Yager owned the team and he wanted to get his team back up to the first division. So he pulled out all the stops and pulled out his wallet, and I mean, mission accomplished. I think they're still in the top league in Czech Republic. So there you go.
Yeah, they are, but they're always last or second last. Like
Yeah.
they struggle just because of players. But no, that's kind of funny. But so here's where it gets to the fun part of this. So you have a good year in Czech. I remember having this conversation with you when I was in Germany, being like, you end up retiring, which I thought was at the time dumb because you had had a good year, and I was like, man, you'll get other jobs and you'll do well. But what made you stop playing, and what made you go, I'm gonna be a professional golfer's caddy?
Um, I think it was that year, that summer between Norway and Czech Republic. My buddy, he was playing pro golf at the time. He needed a fill in for the week, and he called me up, and we've been buddies for forever. He was like, "Hey, I need a last minute fill in. Do you want to come carry the bag?" And I was like, "Well, I don't really know what the heck I'm doing," but he goes, "That's fine." He goes, "Just carry the bag, and we'll have fun." I was like, "All right." So I did that. He had a good tournament, and then I went back to playing hockey, and I went and played in Czech Republic, and the next summer rolls around, and I'd had that bad injury in Norway, and I had a couple more injuries that year in Czech Republic, and I was sort of thinking maybe it might be time to call it quits while I still have a pretty good functioning body. And he said, "Well, why don't you?" He's like, I need a new caddy. Why don't you caddy for me this summer? And we'll have some fun, and I'll work. You don't have to work every event, but you can still take your time towards the middle of the summer, the end of the summer to train and get ready for hockey season. And I was like, all right, I'm all in. So we started doing that. Then as the summer progressed, I was like, you know, having fun doing that, working hard. Didn't have any offers that I was really too interested in. And he had a good year that year. And then he was just like, I'm starting up in January on the Corn Ferry Tour. Would love you to be my full-time caddy. What do you think? I was like, let me think about it. Like, I know at this point, if I stop playing hockey, the offers will probably never come again. Uh, Especially to play in a league where I'd gotten myself to at that point. If I had to wanted to go back, I'd probably going back to try out for a coach team, or I'd be going back to Germany 3 or something like that. So I took some time, I thought about it, and then I was like, you know what? I gave it a good run. Um, but you know, let's see how far I can go with this now. So that's when we started, and I guess that would have been summer of 2019, 2020. And yeah, we got off to a good start that year caddying and playing. He was playing good, and then COVID hit. And I was like, oh God, here we go. Like, here's the end of caddying. Here's the end. Don't have hockey. There's no hockey going on. So, but yeah, we got through that, and then I mean, I guess this is my sixth year doing this, so I guess I've been a caddy longer than I've been a professional hockey player now at this point.
Just pretty crazy to think, but obviously, I think things happen for a reason. And to be honest, like just to kind of go back to when you're someone dealing with injuries in any sport, but we'll keep it to pro hockey here. Like the amount of effort you have to put in, like in terms of work ethic, like on and off the ice, and we're even talking from a level of guys who played, certain levels of Europe, but like obviously the high ones, it's different. In NHL, it's different, but I've noticed, especially now, I just work out in the morning just to kind of stay in shape, and that way I basically don't put on weight or don't get fat. But I've noticed like you have to have that motivation, and you also have to have like your body has to be like able to do it as well, because if you're not motivated to stay or work as hard as you need to play the sport, then it kind of gets pointless, and it's almost like you're not going to be able to give everything you can on the ice eventually. So I think that's something that goes into it. Your mind has to be into it. um so I understand kind of from your side, and now I can see it with myself. Like you do realize there's a time where you're like, it's time to it's time to move on and start the next chapter. So obviously, as you mentioned, you're caddying for Taylor Pendrith there. Very, I would say, very good Canadian golfer. Like I was talking to you off camera, like last weekend, watching the RBC there in Hamilton, like seeing his name, whatever it was. I think I was watching on the Friday or Saturday, and he was -4, and the leaders were at like -8 or -9, like being in contention with that. And I think you said he finished 21st, so finishing top 25, which is a great achievement. What is kind of what's it like caddying for him, and like what's like a normal maybe week or weekend kind of look like for you as his caddy?
Um, I mean, it's basically the same I mean, it's no different than playing pro hockey. I mean, you can pretty much know every week and every day is almost structured the exact same. Um, is ours just a little bit, we're just doing a little bit of a different thing, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, um, we're just out there at the course. We're playing practice round. We're playing 9 holes. We're practicing. He's practicing his putting and chipping and everything. And then Thursday when it starts, it's basically game day, and we play our round Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Well, hopefully Saturday, Sunday if we make the cut. But it's very, I'd say it's very repetitive. I mean, it's not much different than pro hockey, right? You got your set schedule. Each week you pretty much what each week's going to look like in each day. Ours just happens to be, in a different city every week. And for the most part in sunny weather and a warm climate. But yeah, I feel like, I thought I used to travel a lot playing hockey, but we're doing this job. Um, like we start in January, and we go 4 or 5 weeks on the road at a time, changing cities every week. So usually Mondays are a travel day, fly into the new city, check into your hotel or Airbnb, and sort of set up a base for the whole week, and then tear it all down on Sunday and rinse and repeat the next week. I think we just finished 5 weeks in a row. Not too long ago, had a week off, and now we're on week 2 of another 5 week on the road stretch. So we're the Canadian Open last week. We're in Columbus this week for Jack's tournament at Muirfield. We got the U.S. Open in Pinehurst next week down in Carolina. And after that, we go to Connecticut for the Travelers, and then we're in Detroit for the Rocket Mortgage. So lots of flying, lots of air miles, and yeah, not a lot of time at home.
Is that like, so would that be your responsibility then? Like, are you in charge of like organizing flights for him and like if you're staying at a hotel, B&B, stuff like that, or is that handled by somebody else?
He has, he handles all his travel. I do all mine. Um, he'll send me a text message or we'll talk Sunday after the round. He'd be like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna do anything tomorrow on Monday." Um, and he's like, "I'll see you. I'll text you tomorrow night, and I'll figure out a plan for what we're doing Tuesday type thing." Or so I think being the U.S. Open next week, he's definitely probably gonna do something on Monday. So I'll probably try to fly out of here on Sunday night and get to Charlotte, and I'll probably see him sometime at the course Monday around noon. Um, I think our relationship's a little different than most caddy player relationships. So I mean, a lot of them are, we were friends first, and I guess technically, I guess now we're coworkers. Um, Coworkers second, whereas a lot of guys out here, their caddy is basically their employee or their coworker, and they don't have that, friendship first mentality because they're not lifelong friends. Um, Whereas like, it's more so the boss is telling the other guy, here's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for us, it's kind of, like I think he just texted me a few minutes ago and was like, where are you type thing. But um, yeah, like we sort of wing it at the seat of our pants, and he'll text me in the morning sometimes or at night, like, here's the plan for tomorrow. What do you think? We just sort of, go about our day and try to have some fun and try to win some golf tournaments.
He's pretty standard. But no, it's good that you have that kind of friendship mentality first, because then it's not just business, and you can obviously have some fun together as well. Couple more for you here, just because I'll get you going. Obviously, you guys got a big tournament to get ready for, but um, where do you like see yourself in 5 years? I would say, like, obviously, I'm not very familiar with the like golf. Like, it wasn't a sport that I grew up loving or watching, but like, you yourself, like, do you have goals for 5 years down the road? Like, where you see yourself? Like, is there ways to advance in terms of your role, or like how do you see it?
Um, I mean, hopefully I'm still out here doing the same thing. Um, Seems to be like if you're have a pretty good career out here, like guys have been out here for, I mean, if you got look at like a guy like Fluff Cowan, he's been out here, he's 73, he's been out here for like 50 years. Hopefully I'm not still working at 73, but um, yeah, this is something I could definitely see myself doing until the day I retire. Um, there's some big events coming up, and I mean there's certain things you really want to achieve. Like, obviously winning is the number one priority, and it's extremely hard to do when you're trying to compete against the, you know, arguably the best 100 players in the world at their sport every single week. Um, but there's other small things like the President's Cup is coming up this year in Montreal. That's a big one circled on the calendar to try to make that team, especially being in Canada. We got the Summer Olympics coming up, and the cutoff date, I think, for that to make that team is in 2 weeks. So that's a big one. There's certain events like that, and just being able to play in all the majors, like the US Open coming up, that's probably my favorite tournament. Just because it's the equivalent of like our Stanley Cup final, but we do it once a year type thing, and it's usually on a golf course that's so hard that even you know, a, an average golfer like myself would have no chance of even breaking 100. So it's really cool to see these guys who are the best at their job, you know, really have to put every facet of their game to the test. And then the thing I'm probably looking forward to the most is next April is when we get to go to Augusta for the Masters. That'll be pretty cool.
Well, milestones on the
Yeah.
checklist there. Like you brought up the Olympics. I didn't even think of that. Like, so how many golfers would Canada take then for their team?
Um, each country, I mean, Canada technically can take two. It sort of works based on the world ranking system for each player. So if you have more than two inside the top 15 in the world rankings, you can bring more guys. So like the US always gets to bring four because they have four guys inside the top 15, whereas Canada doesn't have any inside the top 15 net right now, so they'll get to bring two players. Um, I think we're third or fourth right now on the rankings for Canadians. So we need a good week here in the next 2 weeks to give ourselves a chance to make that Olympic team, which would be, I think if any time, I remember John Tavares said this. He said the greatest accomplishment for a hockey player is winning the Stanley Cup, but the greatest accomplishment for an athlete is winning a gold medal. So I think that's, no matter what sport you play, um, anytime you really get to represent your country, especially if it's at the Olympics, that's pretty damn cool. So that'd be really something really special to make that team and go to Paris in the fall.
Yeah, that's very correct. I think John put that perfectly. I've said that to anyone like who I've had on this podcast. Like it doesn't matter. Like obviously I played the World Junior A Challenge for Canada East and got to wear the logo. And at the end of the day, anytime you can wear and represent your country, it's a tremendous honor and a tremendous feat. So hoping you guys will make the team there. Hopefully you can have a good couple weeks here and get bumped up there in the rankings. But last one here for you before I let you go. I always like to end on this one, ask kind of the guests their opinion. But what is one piece of advice or maybe multiple pieces of advice if you have it that you would give the younger generation out there? So if you're speaking to young athletes, obviously you normally I say hockey players, but you obviously are a two-sport athlete. So um speaking to maybe 15, 16, 17-year olds who are in either hockey or golf, like what is one or multiple pieces of advice you would give them?
Probably just to enjoy it. I mean, now that I'm out of hockey, don't actually realize how fast it goes by. Like I remember when I started playing in Niagara, I was like, oh, If I'm lucky, I'll play 5 years. Like 5 years is a long time. It's like now I look back and I think this is coming up 10 years I've been out of the OHL. I was like, it doesn't feel like that long ago that I was like still playing hockey, but I catch myself every now and then because guys out here will find out I played hockey and they'll start asking me about hockey, and I'll be like, they'll be like, "Oh, when did you get drafted?" I'll be like, "Oh, 2011," and I'll be like, "Oh man, that was like 14 years ago." It's like it sort of catches you how fast everything goes by, especially in hockey. Like, you're having a good time and you're traveling around, and it's like you blink and basically the season's over, right? So I feel like if I could tell myself at 16, it's like, just enjoy everything that comes with it, like the ups and the downs, but it goes by fast, and once it's over, it's gone forever type thing. So just really, make the most of every day you have, because when it's over forever.
Great advice, man. That's one thing I tell everyone. And one thing I've obviously like, I think a lot of athletes struggle when they're done is you realize, wow, it went by so much faster than you thought. Because like when you're living in the moment, things go fast. You don't think about things, and we all think, oh, I'm gonna play college or a junior, and then I'm gonna play 10 years of pro or whatever. Whether you do it or not doesn't matter. But even if you do it, the 10 years go by fast. I'm sure some of those guys, like you brought up Tavares, how many years he played, 12, 13 years in NHL, and he's probably like, feel like yesterday when I had my first year kind of thing. So that's great advice, man. For all the listeners out there, it's very true. Um, Enjoy it. It goes by fast, and one day you'll be like us, looking back and being like, "Wow, did I really graduate university 10 years ago? Did I graduate the OHL 14 years ago?" Like it's pretty crazy. But Mitch, I appreciate you doing this, buddy. Obviously you guys got a busy schedule here as you mentioned, so I'll let you get going. Good luck this weekend, the tournament. Um, Happy to have had you on and share your story and kind of go down memory lane there. And as we like to say in Norway, there, do some talk.
Do some talk, buddy.
No, I appreciate it, dude. And for those listening, when I post this, I'll tag this guy, the Instagram in there. You can see the lifestyle he's got now, being a caddy for Taylor Penders there, and kind of the cool adventures they have. But appreciate everyone listening. Give the podcast a follow on YouTube as well if you want to see it live. Until next week, cheers and ciao.